Hello and welcome to the Innovation Book Club, the podcast that makes sense of the big ideas that drive creativity and innovation. We're your hosts, Alex Drago and Wais Pirzad, and we believe that while there's never been a greater need for new ideas, perspectives and solutions, understanding exactly what innovation is and how it works has never been more difficult or confusing. So our purpose for this podcast is clear. In each episode, we take an important text from the innovation field, deconstruct it, and then talk through the key ideas to help you develop a more innovative mindset. Okay then, for this episode, what we wanted to do was to reflect on the previous episodes that we've recorded, to have a think about some of the things we've learned, some of the things that have stuck in our minds, some of the things that have impacted on our own work or how we approach our work. Sounds good, Wais?
Yes, definitely.
Excellent. So probably the best way to address this then is actually to go with our gut. What are the things that have consistently affected or impacted your approach to innovation or your work as a result of the podcasts that we've recorded?
Well, in the previous episodes, we've talked about different innovation or innovation-related concept or models, and what's stuck really stuck with me was the fact that whatever model or concept or theory you're using to come up with new ideas or test out ideas, it comes down to the human part of it. It comes down to the humans.
Right.
So what really stuck on me and what I'm now using in my job is like I used to think isolated about ideas and would design ideas within my job as an analyst. Okay, this is a system or this is a solution or a process or whatever the teams need. And I would use innovation models. I would assume like, okay, I know these innovation techniques and models and theories, and I'm using it within my own thoughts and thinking and design. And therefore, it's going to be right, and it's going to be the appropriate best solution. So and then like I would go towards my teams or towards my management, whatever it is, go to the users and ask them like, this is the solution, right? And would, if after that phase, I would ask for feedback and then started iterating and so on and so forth. But now, first of all, for one of the lessons is like, no, we should start with humans itself instead of starting on the desk with designing things. Start with humans, go towards the users or the end users, whoever it is, go towards the one which experiences a pain or is frustrated about something, and then try to understand that clearly, and then reverse engineer the solution eventually. Okay, this is what you're experiencing, how, why, and etc.
Right.
Using questioning and eventually to understand the core frustration or problem. And that's what I'm using now in my job. One of the lessons I've learned was this.
Yeah. I've
I
had
don't
the
know if you
same
can relate.
thought. Yeah, I've had the same thought. I wrote in my notes that innovation is above all a human action. So it's not about a technological solution. It is about how humans adapt to their environment and how they shape their environment in order to serve other people. And that becomes the driver for innovation. And technology just helps to facilitate that. So innovation then becomes a very social process. And that, I think, has come through almost every episode that we've done so far, from the Stephen Johnson one, which was like most of the ideas now come from a social environment, through to some of the last episodes that we've done around, well, what creates value in the social era. It is about the social interaction and how you engage with new ideas. And then with the service dominant logic, it's the idea that you are rendering service. That service is transacted within a marketplace. That marketplace is an extension of our social structures. And so for me, I'm the same. Innovation is a very human and social action.
And how did that express made you express it in your work? How did you see that in your work, or did you see that even in your work?
Well, I don't think it has in my work yet. But the wider thought was the things we were just talking about, healthcare, which is around the data solutions.
Yeah, and even the data solutions comes down to the humans eventually, because it's about what we talked about. It's about making humans making decisions, and humans
Right.
making how they're making decisions based on their guts, based on their historical strategy and models or theories, whatever it is, or is it based on what humans, social creatures, actually do within healthcare, with about healthcare?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the challenge, right? That's the challenge that the policies that I work in are really posing now. Is that if you want to save money, if you want to do a better job, it's not just about a technological solution to help you do that or to have more resource. It
Right.
is about a better understanding of how humans live, and therefore how you can help them live better lives. That's really where the opportunity is. And our current model for healthcare is very much about treating the sick, right? So the innovations are about treating them more effectively. Whereas the area that I work in, which is about preventive measures, which is like how do you make sure you don't treat them at all because the situation never arises.
Okay, that's interesting.
But for me, that I suppose the influence for that has around, if you're touching on the papers or the books that we've read, it it does touch across them, right? So it is
Right.
about accepting that innovations are a product of their environment. That's the Stephen Johnson thing.
Right.
The innovation ideas emerge when the environment itself changes.
Right.
It is about the service dominant logic because it's about what is the service that you're rendering to people, which is moving on from I'm treating a sick person to how can I help you live a better life? How can I help you live longer? How can I help you live healthier? How can I help you to be more productive?
Right.
And for healthcare, that is a massive shift at a national level, at a policy level.
So did it change your perspective? Maybe influence your perspective. The previous episodes, maybe.
Yeah, I would say so in that particular environment. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because that's what I'm hearing. I think, like also, yeah, exactly like you said. Like you now recognize and understand how a particular business model of NHS works, and now you're recognizing how it should actually work. Even without definitive answers, giving definitive answers, you're like, okay, maybe we should go towards the people and trying to figure out what they need, what they want, and maybe what they actually need, based on assumptions, and then validate that, and then reverse engineer it towards a particular model strategy within NHS.
Well, I think that's right. So again, so if you come back, and again, I wrote this in my notes that I just wished more people were more familiar with Peter Drucker's theory of the business, because by and large, what it doesn't matter where you work, you largely do yeah, innovation becomes about how do you do what you currently do, only a bit better. But Peter Drucker's work was about how do you do something different because what you used to be doing isn't effective anymore. And the challenge that I work in healthcare is that the nation has reached the state where it's like we can't afford to carry on investing in the NHS the way that we used to. We have, by treating sick people, we have to find ways to prevent people from getting sick in the first place. And so if you look at Peter Drucker and you look at the questions that he poses, when you're saying, well, what are the assumptions? The underlying assumption is that healthcare treats sick people.
Right.
And now the political analysis is shifting and the policy is shifting towards, well, it's not just about treating sick people, it's how do you create wellness in the nation?
Well, is that policy really shifting? Is it shifting and changing now?
That's what they're saying, yeah.
That's what they're saying they want to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's what's called a white paper. So in the UK, basically, it's 3 stages, right? It's a green paper where it's like, this is the idea about the government, what the government wants to do.
Yeah.
And then they get some feedback. And then after that, they produce a white paper.
Right.
And then that white paper again goes through another analysis. And then after that, it's passed as law.
Right.
So these changes around the NHS are in the white paper phase. And so it looks as though that's what's going to become law. And so we need to start thinking about addressing those things in the white paper, which are about how do we get better at preventing people from getting sick in the first place. In order to create better value for money, in order to create a healthier and happier population, in order to help us become more productive, in order to help us maintain our independence in age, and so on and so on. But often when I talk to people, they don't understand that. And that's why I say you should read the Peter Drucker, because it forces you to test your assumptions. The game has changed. The rules have changed. And so
all the whole assumptions from the whole environment changed.
Yeah. So the business model that you have, the value proposition has changed because it's no longer just about treating sick people. It's about creating wellness. So then what are the factors that help to contribute towards wellness? Well, it's a different set of factors towards treating sick people, right? So you have to be much more engaged in the community rather than just go to this government department over here, there's a hospital, and they'll put a cast on your broken leg, right? The idea is, how do you stop you breaking the leg in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And that's the real challenge. And so I think we would have more productive conversations about that if people had a more general and a deeper understanding of what innovation is.
That's an interesting point. I'm like, so this becomes really important within any sector almost. Understanding where ideas come from, understanding how you can test ideas, understanding how you can solve problems, understanding really the core way or the key way to solve problems or whatever it is. Like historically, exactly like Lee said, like there were theories made, models made, strategies made, and eventually everyone assumes that this is the case, this is what we have to do. And then like now everything changes, and then they're like, okay, what do we need to do? We need something else, so we are going towards this change. They're going towards change, but still, it would definitely benefit if they would learn more about those concepts.
Yeah.
On that strategic level.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the challenge is they may get that at a policy level in the government. That's what they're trying to do.
Right.
But is that disseminated and understood down through the different layers of the NHS when the expertise is in the old business model?
Yeah, exactly. From the strategic level, it's the same expertise, the same assumptions, the
Yeah,
same theories and models.
yeah,
Yeah. But I guess maybe it's also human how they go forward. Because, I mean, if they make a model and it works at that moment, suddenly after 10 years and 15 years, whole organizations, no, the organization don't change. And then, like, it still works, but now it doesn't work. So, like, is it a human reaction that's they're not open for a change? And then, like, even if they would know these models, would understand these models, would would they be able to change easier, or change their policy, their strategies? That's the question I'm triggered now on.
Well, and that is the valid question, right? That's the fundamental part of it. And without going into, you know,
Yeah,
detail and so on and so on, obviously some people will get it, some people won't get it. But
exactly.
in my research, there are some people who really get it, and there are some people who really don't get it, and the drivers for that are different, right? I mean, some people are wedded to their expertise, their existing expertise, and the fear is that their expertise will be lost. Other people are like, well, my expertise is actually in a different area, so therefore I'm more open to the changes.
Yeah, that's true. Well, talking about fear, I must say the other change that happened with me after because of our episodes, I must say that it was the fact that I'm more calmer and less stressing about starting a company.
Right,
Like, I used to have a lot of stress and worry about being late starting a company or a startup, and being too late um, to to build a great startup.
right,
I like to create value for others, because I just that gives me energy. I like that. And eventually, and before, I was like, okay, I'm too late. I need to start something. And I would, like, we had many talks, like, let's start this idea. Yay, we're going to start. And eventually, didn't took off. It didn't took off. It didn't took off. Many times with you, many times me myself with others, or on my own. I had a lot of ideas, but it didn't took off. But after having these episodes and these conversations with you about those articles or books, for example, where ideas come from, or the creative destruction, um, uh, I understood that I understood where ideas really come from, and I understood that um, ideas has value for people when it starts also with people, from people, in
right,
a social context. And you can't force ideas to be into companies or into startups. You can't say, like, okay, this is the idea, I'm going to make it successful. And I must say that I was influenced a lot by social media, and also television, and whatever, radio, whatever it is. I hear still, and I heard a lot about, okay, this guy has been successful. He just started a really basic startup and solved this problem. He became a millionaire. I'm like, oh crap, I'm late. That's a really easy idea. Why didn't I come with such an idea? And I would make myself more stressing. I would become more stressful, and I'm like, and now I'm like, no, it's like the environment. It's like that guy lived or was active in a particular environment, and within that environment, in that social context, he recognized the need, and he solved it, and eventually the side effect was a company, a startup.
right.
So that's also a point. I don't know if you can relate to this. What changed in me?
Or I think there's some research that says like innovations are developed in a sort of pyramid, right? there might be 10,000 people experiencing a problem,
Right.
and then 1,000 people might think of a solution. 100 people might come up with a solution and test it. 10 of those might work, and one will be successful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess.
So whatever problem you're facing in life, you're not the only person who is experiencing that, right? Because by and large, we live in different countries, but essentially there are many, the way we live our life is very similar.
Yeah.
So I suppose what you get on social media, well, A, it's not reality anyway, but B, you get the top of the pyramid that has been successful, and not the other
Exactly.
100,000, right? And
Yeah, that's true.
that's the point. So, I suppose the question then is, what social circles are you a part of that is going to help an idea develop, germinate, rise to the surface, and so on and so on. So typically that comes from a couple of things, right? You're either, I've got this desperate problem that I need to solve, or I just want to do this, that sort of response, or it's like, I'm technically proficient in this area, I can provide a solution to a particular problem.
Yeah, that's true. That could be a relevant question. But the question I eventually asked myself in relation to the changes I experienced is like, is it necessary to pursue every opportunity you recognize?
No, no, because ideas are cheap, right? I mean, they're 10 a penny.
Exactly. Exactly that was my assumption. Like I had an idea and I would be so energized, like, okay, I need to change this, improve this, and validate this, create a company and startup or whatever it is. I need to talk with Alex. I need to ask his opinion. Like, we need to start. You probably remember many moments of my, like, I asked you, like, do you have a moment through chat
Yeah,
or
yeah.
video call? Like, I would talk you through one of my ideas, but that was my assumption. That was how I thought.
The switch is around the stuff that we talked about in the service dominant logic episode. Whereas if you're saying ideas are at the core of innovation, right, then you end up pursuing every idea.
Yes. Yes.
But if it's about, as you said earlier, can I identify the service that needs to be rendered to a particular customer or something, then there's probably more legs in an idea that's developed along that lines, even if it's going to take longer to get there,
Yeah.
because you're starting with the end in mind, rather than just, here's another idea, I'll throw it out, see if it works. Well, that's fine, but it's a very wide funnel, right? It's better to narrow the funnel slightly to the particular area in which you have some expertise, or there's a particular problem or something like that,
Yeah, that's true.
because then you know what the solution is in terms of the service that people want from it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that was indeed my realization because of our talks. Like, I would have an idea exactly like this is broad as I don't know what, but eventually I would say, this is the idea. I need to start this up and make it public and whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But now I understand, no, wise. Like, you need to talk. No, you need to do what you like to do. Like, go on with your life. And eventually, if you stumble upon within your social context to a particular problem, or you recognize an opportunity that's still not an idea for a startup or a big company, that you can explore it a little bit more, test it, try to solve it for free, and see if there is value in your solution. And eventually, the side effect can be a startup or a company. That's what I'm saying now to me.
Yeah, and that's that sort of slow hunch idea that
Exactly.
Stephen Johnson talked about, right? Which is why, of course, innovation then becomes about how do you just sort of test those ideas and so on. If you want to accelerate that process, you need to accelerate the slow hunches. How do you accelerate the slow hunches? Well, by testing a bunch of hypotheses and so
Yeah.
on and so on, right? But you might get to that stage if you are like, well, at least I sort of understand the broad area that I want to recognize things in. That your internal antenna, will respond to, or will flag up.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, exactly. The slow hunches explanation by what's his name again?
Stephen Johnson.
Yeah, Steven Johnson. Yes, Steven Johnson is exactly what definitely a learning for me. Like slow hunches would eventually lead me to some value, and it's even it's not necessary, or even if it doesn't lead me to to a value or a startup or a company or anything else, it's still okay to not have an idea. It's like you said, it's you a million people experience it, and one of those million people is going to become financially successful, but maybe 70 other percent of the all those people are still successful, but not specifically to that problem.
But I think that, well, that's true. Yeah, the thing that I would say about your particular situation, knowing you know, better than a few people at least,
Yeah.
is that you've already been an entrepreneur,
Hmm.
right? And it didn't
Right.
satisfy you,
That's true.
right? So
Yeah.
you you ran a successful company. When somebody said, "Oh, I'll buy this off of you," there was something in you that said, "Oh, all right then."
Exactly. My gut feeling said, okay, go for it. Yeah.
So then it becomes around that. What is the focus that's going to satisfy you? Is it just about building a company? Because you could do that, right? You could choose almost anything and capture a corner of a market. Or is it about actually building something that is uniquely Weiss's?
Yeah. That's a good question, actually, because recently I've been thinking a lot about exactly this question. Like, do I need to build a company or a startup? Is it really about the product, or is it really about the feeling that I have to start a company now based on the models and theories we talked about? Like, okay, I have to recognize, I have to force myself to recognize, and I social out of a social context, based on my gut feelings, opportunity, an opportunity. I'm like, no, I have understood and came to insight, like what I what we are actually doing in our podcast is making complex ideas or complex or even simple ideas, whatever you can call it, but making a complex idea understandable. Like that is what I really like to do, and I think that I have decided that that's going to be my focus, like
Right,
making sense of complex ideas for not only for me, for for other
right, right.
people,
Okay,
and making my focus that, and eventually see if its side effect is going to be a startup, a company, whatever it is, great. If it's
right,
not,
right,
I think I will be still happy.
right. Well, fair enough. Yeah, fair enough.
I think that's also the core lesson out of our talks I had until now. I don't know if you can relate to that in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I've been through. I'm a bit older than you, so I've been through that whole thing.
Yeah,
I ran a social enterprise for a while,
right,
but then also I'm sort of the age where I'm like, I don't need to prove myself.
right,
I know the work I do is good, right? So where can I invest my time and effort in areas that are enjoyable for me and beneficial for other people?
right, right,
And that of course is still, it still taxes you, right? Of course it does. But
right,
we're just in a different place in life, right? But I would still like to develop an idea, and see it realized in the real world in some way. I mean, I just suspect that at the heart of me, I'm probably an educator.
right,
So it would be about something that is, not necessarily educational, but there would have to be elements in it which are transformative for people. So it's about, for me, it's about the, well, what's the impact on the end audience, the end user, customer? That's always what it's been about for me. A very direct way of doing that is through education. And that's why I've always kind of worked in some broad educational area. But it doesn't necessarily, I don't, you know, I'm not a teacher.
I'm triggered to the question. I don't know if it's relevant within this episode, but I'm going to still talk about it. It's like, are we able to combine your interest, what you just talked about, what you just mentioned, with my interest in making complex matters understandable and like, okay, what if can we make this the like pick historical stories or events, for example World War II, like you talk about it, explain the complexities of it, and eventually I would question it and translate, like, okay, so you mean that Hitler does this and has done this of these
Right.
things? This was the reasons Hitler chose this direction, for example. It's an extreme example, but still,
Yeah.
like, is that really the reason? I'm like, are we able now to combine two of our interests in such a way to create value for people, like providing them with a some information, some knowledge about a particular event they have searched about, and they listen to your talk about the core information about it, and eventually after your talk, I'm going to question, like, okay, you mean that it means this for us as human beings, so I have to understand this from the story. I don't know if that's an opportunity.
Well, it might depend on the specifics, but yes. But that's the challenge in education, right? Is that we still assume that knowledge is the same as learning, and knowledge is you know, you can acquire huge amounts of knowledge and learn nothing.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
learning is about how you engage with the world around you and shape it. So how you know, how do you interpret it? How do you act within it? How do you shape it? How do you have an influence? And the challenge today for all educators is that you can't measure that at age 16 or 18 or something like that.
Right.
Or 21, whatever it is you finish university, right?
Right.
Because the application of knowledge comes throughout the whole of life, or, you know, at least within the next few years.
Yeah.
So inevitably what happens is that you fill people full of knowledge and then force them to write essays in order to show that they understand the importance of that knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And my, you know, one of the reasons I don't really enjoy working in museums anymore is that, well, so what? I mean, knowing about stuff, well, so what?
Not anymore. Yeah.
You know, access to information is not the problem. We all thought access to information was the problem. Actually, you know, we have more access to information than we ever had before.
Right.
But we have more crackpot ideas and idiots running around than ever before.
Yeah.
So, you know, so what are the implications for education, right? Is our education system failing? Do we have bad teachers? Well, I suspect it's probably nothing to do with the teachers. I suspect it's to do with the policymakers and their very idea of what education is, because, you know, because we're stuck in this sort of loop.
Yeah.
We've kind of reached probably the limits of the education system, or the university system.
So basically, coming what you said, relating that to my idea, like, okay, so it's not only about the story of the Second World War, it's about what it means to someone else, what it can learn from it, and what insight can it gain from the story of the World War II.
Yeah. So, it is a hop, skip, and a jump away from knowing about the events of World War II, and then knowing how the events of World War II shaped your life and identity.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So, in my family's case, for example, it didn't affect my mum's side at all because my mum grew up in Africa. Right.
Right.
But it did affect my father's because, he was born just before the Second World War, but they were refugees during the Second World War.
Right.
So the very fact that we ended up being born where we were born, that he lived where he lived, and so on, is directly related to the Second World War. And what is the trauma then that's passed on from that experience? How does that inform who I am? That's the transformative power of education. But how do you actually teach that?
Through podcasts. Do you need to know what Second World War means for you? Listen to the podcast of Wais and Alex.
Well, that it's as valid a point as any, right? That's the power of technology. Technology increases your capability and capacity to deliver service. So before podcasting,
Yeah.
before the dynamics of digital engagement,
Information sharing. Yeah.
how would you learn about the Second World War, right? Well, you watch a documentary perhaps on the TV, maybe
You
on the
go to a
radio.
library.
You go to the library, you read books, and so on, right?
Right.
But none of those things would it cause you to reflect on how that has shaped your own life. Whereas you can do that with a podcast because you can directly address it.
Yeah, exactly. For example, I'm triggered to the to my own history. Like, I'm also a refugee from Afghanistan, and if, for example, someone is interested uh, uh, to learn about the wars in Afghanistan, and okay, what does the war in Afghanistan mean for me as a as a as a Dutch citizen? Like, okay, the war means like you're going to have neighbors which are from other countries, not only Afghanistan, but maybe from Syria because of the Syrian war. What does that mean? It's like it means that you're going to be engaged with them. The whole society can be changed if you look to historical history, other history parts of history where because of war people moved to other areas, so the whole culture changed within a particular time. So this is the changes you're experiencing, and this is what the results of it is these are the results what you're now experiencing and what you're in it. So like I can imagine that could be interesting for people, for whatever teenager or adult, whatever, whomever it is. It could be interesting and transformative maybe.
Yeah. And the important point is that if you are connecting, if you're saying that innovation is a response to changing demographics, right? It is a response to a changing environment, changing environmental needs,
Yes.
right? Then what you have to understand to innovate is how diverse people really are. So if you want to address a need, you have to engage with that diversity.
Yeah, right. There's not one profile of one, there's not one profile for the customer.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not that, respecting the individual is, of course, absolutely paramount in terms of our human relations,
Yeah.
but it is good for any kind of business that you're in
Yeah, definitely.
because ultimately innovation is about serving a customer is providing a service. And again, one of the ideas we haven't covered yet is the idea of disruption. Clayton Christian's work on disruption. And
Right.
that is all, even though it's a sort of technical pseudo-economic thing, it's about at the heart of it is diversity. You are disrupted because you are not engaging with a certain demographic that's been left behind. Or rather, you have left them behind because you are prioritizing your resources for an ongoing demographic.
Oh, yeah.
And what happens is that someone comes along and says, "Well, you're not engaging with these people. I'll engage with these people."
That's
And over
disruption.
time, they get better and better and better, and then you're disrupted. That's the idea of disruption, in a nutshell. But that's why diversity and innovation go together.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not only that you're serving a more diverse customer base, you need diversity in your company in order to understand a diverse customer base.
In order to understand the changing environments, the changing diversity, the diversity change between customers and within the environment where customers are. Like those customers you serve, like I remember in Belgium when I worked at Board of Innovation, the innovation company, we would make innovation teams sketch out a profile to initially test their ideas, which is fine, but eventually, in terms of disruption and innovation, I would agree definitely that through the course of time you must keep considering the fact that the changing environment will result to a changing will result in a more diverse people, more diversity in the needs and personalities and whatever it is.
Right. Yeah.
If you don't tap on that, is exactly like you said. Another company would come, hey, this diversity is growing. Oh, voila, you have a new company.
Yeah. And my frustration working in museums is that it's like, well, we know the environment's changing, but this is what you need to know about culture. And I'm the expert, and I'm going to tell you how it is. And we'll change the words and stuff, but the experience is still the same. Well, that's not engagement with diversity, is it?
Yeah. They're like acting as if the environment needs them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the fundamental challenge. that they can't grasp because they're so used to getting a pot of money or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But but actually what you're competing with is people's attention, of their money, and so on and so on. You're still competing in a marketplace,
Definitely.
but there's a refusal to sort of engage with that marketplace, and that's one of the causes of the challenges, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Every company suffers from that same challenge. It's just that for museums is particularly challenging. But if you look, for example, at Microsoft, right, under Steve Ballmer, everything is Windows. Everything is Windows. It's got to be Windows. Xbox has got to be Windows. Phones got to be Windows. Everything's going to be on a Windows platform.
Right.
And then now they're like, yeah, it's just about the cloud, right?
Yeah.
How can you engage with us on the cloud? How can we empower your solutions through
integration? They integrate with any environment, any type of need, whatever type of company it is, they can integrate with it.
Yeah, and that's why they are succeeding again.
Yeah,
because it reached the end of that. Windows as a desktop.
Yeah, exactly.
It's much more about the dynamics of what technology can do for you as a consumer, as a business.
Yeah, that's true.
But again, that again is the service dominant logic, right? What are you trying to do? How can our platforms help you to do it?
Yeah, exactly. They responded to the changing environment, that everything becomes connected and every company has their own specific needs. Instead of dictating this is the solution of Windows you need, asking like, okay, whatever you need, what do you need? We can integrate with it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that when I was writing some notes yesterday, I was like, I think one of the key things that I've changed my mind about just as a result of the sort of conversations we've had, is what lies at the heart of kind of creativity or human creativity. So you have to appreciate, I come from arts and humanities background, right? So in the arts and humanities,
Right.
you worship the idea of the Renaissance artist, right? This genius like Leonardo or Raphael or, some Caravaggio, somebody with supreme talent,
Right.
somebody with supreme technical ability
Right.
that's internal to them. And somehow through the arts, they're able to express their inner persona, and that's what we worship.
Right.
And actually, everything that we've read about innovation is that that's false. It is a social thing. It is responding to the external environment. It requires, multiple efforts to get it right. It's a long-term effort.
They collected only the end results of all those changing environments and only the successes, basically.
and so we're investing in the wrong thing, right? We're investing in people who have. This is generalization, but if you think innovation is just about the idea, then you're investing in the wrong thing, because you're investing in the Renaissance artist. What you should be investing in is the process that socializes ideas in order to test their efficacy and their value.
Well, that's not only a generalization. That can be a generalization, but I mean that's the facts and the experiences of current environments and companies. Like they are experiencing it literally like now. They invest.
It's the same. Yeah,
it's
you're
the
right.
same.
Yeah.
That is the reason we even have our podcast, because all those other companies are trying to innovate.
Yeah.
Why are we not succeed? We have the greatest people, the best products, the best everything, the best.
Yeah. It's this Renaissance idea, right?
Exactly.
Well, it's not just a Renaissance idea, but it's a sort of product of the Industrial Revolution, right? And the hierarchy, and the person who knows the most about widgets.
Same principle still.
Is at the top. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
That's interesting learning.
Yeah, and I only really thought about that because I think I mentioned it to you in one conversation. I'd watched some lecture about, did Shakespeare write Shakespeare?
Yeah, right. I just was triggered about it.
And the idea is that, that Shakespeare wasn't a sort of Renaissance genius, right? It was the somebody else wrote Shakespeare, but Shakespeare was the sort of
entrepreneur,
the producer, as it were, that sort of realized it for the public,
Yeah.
And both of those, both the writing and the realization, require phenomenal talents, but they're different kinds of talents. But
yeah,
obviously, I'm not qualified to say whether Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare or not. But the idea is, well, whoever wrote them, it didn't spring from their inner genius. It sprang from their understanding of the wider environment.
It's the result of their gut feelings, or their, how do you say that? Is the result of all those insights they gained through the course of years. It eventually was the results. Shakespeare pieces of Shakespeare.
Yeah, technical expression.
Yeah, exactly. Technical expression, exactly, an expression of their previous insights or collection of insights.
But for me, I don't care. It doesn't make any difference to my life who specifically put pen to paper. But but for me, it is that, well, innovation is a massive sort of social process.
I think that can be the main lesson we both can share.
Yeah.
That innovation is definitely a social thing, idea, and shouldn't be a led by products or resources or systems, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's interesting it's interesting if you look at it from a basic point of view. Like, we are humans. Every product, every service, every organization, every system, every AI system, data, whatever it is, we are making, for who are we making that? Not for other robots or for Martians. It's for other humans. Like, why are we not asking other humans,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
what do you need? Do we really need this, or am I making it just to please myself, my own
Yeah.
assumptions?
That's a good question, because it then comes down to, again, those things in the service dominant logic, right? What's the distance between the product that you've produced and the people using it to understand the service that is being rendered?
In organizations, it can be a lot,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
huge distances.
And it's easy to mask it, and the size of the projects are so big, it's hard to know, and so on and so on.
Even if you, at least in my case, and probably in your case, like when I was little, my mother would ask what we want to eat at night.
Right.
Like, instead of dictating it, she would ask, and the chances for having eventually a meal that everyone would like was like
Increased.
100% increased. Like, so, like, instead of dictating it, then it would be chances of almost zero that, or I mean, lower chances that everyone would like the dinner.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Like, that is, with that concept, we are being raised, or at least many people are being raised.
yeah.
And even if I look at it to myself personally, individually, isolated from others, like if I go shopping, for example, imagine I go shopping on my own, eventually I would ask myself what I would need, instead of randomly deciding I'm going to this restaurant, and
Right.
I'm randomly deciding I'm going to eat this. It's based on randomness. Like, that doesn't work like that. On an individual level, we even ask ourselves directly what we need and want and what we desire.
Yeah.
But when it comes to innovation, like, at least in my case, and I've read a lot of cases like you have about startups, like they create an idea in their head with a lot of assumptions, what other people need or desire or want, and they, instead of asking them beforehand, like, they work it out and eventually say, oh, why didn't it work?
Yeah.
It's against the principles you're using for yourself, almost.
There's that book, that is precise, that is ultimately the point, right? We forget that it's too easy to forget that we're trying to serve other human beings.
Exactly.
There's a story in, I think it's Competing with Luck, which is another Clayton Christensen book, and he tells this funny story of it's about the jobs to do theory.
Jobs to be done, you
Jobs
mean?
to be done, yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. And he gives this example of why it's useful, and he tells the tale of a popular fast food chain, right? And they can't work out why they're selling milkshakes first thing in the morning. and and so what they do is that because the segmentation says these people shouldn't be having milkshakes, right?
Exactly.
So they put people on the door, and when people buy milkshakes, they ask, "Why have you bought a milkshake?"
Right.
And it turns out that it's largely men who haven't had time for breakfast,
Yeah.
or they've had breakfast and it's not enough, and they know they're not going to be eating for another 4 or 5 hours because they've got a busy day ahead. And they say, well, donuts are too fattening, and so on and so on. But the milkshake, I just sort of have it sits in my stomach, and then I'm okay for a few hours. Right?
It's also sometimes healthy.
Yeah, well, probably not from a fast food chain, but
No, exactly.
so they're like, oh, but that doesn't align with the with the segmentation model. And they work out that actually what people want is better breakfast, right?
Yeah.
And so they then develop better breakfast products, because the service they need to render isn't about better milkshakes, right? The service they need to render is about, how can I provide my customers with a nutritious and filling breakfast that's going to last them until lunchtime.
I am even triggered to another idea of mine, or an idea I had once. Is like, if you imagine, if you would have a restaurant. Majority of restaurants I went before was like, they had a standard menu.
Right.
Like they dictate what they are expert in and what they can cook for you. Like imagine going to a restaurant where the menu changes through the course of time based on their really what people like to eat. Like you come inside and like, hey, you had a particular type of chicken. Yeah, but the majority of people didn't like it, so we moved
Right,
on
right,
towards
right. Yeah,
something else. It changes completely, constantly based on the needs of people.
yeah.
Like exactly like you say about the fast food chain, it's the management on top somewhere having learned about certain innovation models. Oh, we need a profile of a customer. Okay, this is the profile. Okay, this is going to be the basic profile of our next strategy, marketing strategy, whatever it is. We are going to market.
Well, it is that difference between the goods dominant logic and the product service dominant
Exactly.
logic. Like goods dominant logic says, we have milkshakes. How can we sell more milkshakes? Let's segment the audience and then target them, right?
Right.
Service dominant logic says, why are people coming to a restaurant? and what service can we render for them?
Why are they buying the
Yeah, yeah,
milkshake
yeah,
in the basic
yeah.
sense? Yeah. Basically, we're still humans. Whatever we are doing, we should consider ourselves and consider others
Yeah, yeah.
instead of considering models, theories, principles, systems, technologies first.
Yeah, I mean, it's the imperfections of the marketplace, I guess, right?
Yeah, you
All
can
that
say
kind
that.
of stuff. Yeah. Have you had any more thoughts about creative destruction?
These were my main learnings, what we just talked about. What about you?
The one that came up about creative destruction was, I don't know, I posted a link about this group of football clubs who wanted to create a super league,
Right,
and they're largely owned by either Americans or they're in massive amounts of debt, right? And the
right,
idea was that these 12 clubs were going to break away and they were going to have their own championship
right,
across Europe. And they would sell the TV rights and so on and so on. So they would keep a larger portion of the money,
right.
or all the money, right? But that would destroy the national leagues in
Yeah,
the other countries, right? And the driver for this is they they don't like the idea of being relegated. So they don't like the competitive element,
right,
but also they can't control their own spending. So they're spending so much on players and salaries and stuff like that that they have to keep on getting more money in.
right,
And so what they wanted to do was create their own league, no relegation, and then they keep all the TV rights.
right.
And that, I thought, that's a good example of creative destruction,
Yeah, definitely.
because essentially it's destroying
The whole market.
the whole, yeah, everything. It would just be like, you guys carry on playing football, but it doesn't matter because we're keeping the lion's share. And there was such a kickback from the supporters and even managers and players coming out and saying, we don't want to compete in a league where there's no jeopardy. Like, what's the point of turning up and playing?
Yeah,
And they all backtracked within a few days, and I'm sure it'll come back again. But what they forgot was that what makes football special is actually the history of it. People on the terraces, the whole heritage of football, and not just taking a brand and getting one brand to compete against another brand in a pointless sort of competition.
yeah.
But you can see from that example who the winners would be, who the losers would be.
If they definitely proceed with this idea, I agree with you completely. The whole market will be disrupted.
Well, I was just thinking about the Warren Berger book, A More Beautiful Question. And occasionally I found myself when I'm at work thinking, I'm working on something. what kind of question am I trying to answer with this? So he has this framework, right? You remember? I can't remember what the framework is.
Oh, it's why? Yeah, why you're experiencing a particular problem, and then what if we can have these options and whatever, and then it's like afterwards it's like working the process out and the how question.
I don't really engage with any of those questions.
Me neither.
And I was wondering, well, why? And of course, it's because he's a journalist, right? What he's trying to do is make the idea of innovation accessible rather than it being a tool that he's used in order to promote or to empower people to kind of innovate.
Well, I agree with that, and because I'm not using it, also, well, his main point that questions are important. I agree completely with that. Like question instead of organizations demanding answers or judging people based on the answers, it's good to see what type of questions those people ask, because it will eventually lead people to have more understanding of a particular concept, problem, situation, whatever it is, to make informed decisions. Like I agree completely with that, but because like you say, he has created a model like why, what if, and how, that really I can't really use that in my daily practice or in my personal life.
Yeah.
I agree with the questioning. I'm proceeding with that. Even I'm in my job, I'm training myself with reflections also about how I questioned and how I can uh, ask the most relevant question for the different people I'm engaging with. Like I'm doing that, but the model itself, I don't know. It's not really generally applicable, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's for me. It's also the same with the Rifkin one, with the third industrial revolution.
Right.
Very interesting. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that model.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm like, do I have to? Should I now start a solar company where I install solar panels, or because it's growing because of the third industrial revolution? What do I have to do? Like,
Yeah,
just wait and experience it, I guess.
yeah. I mean, the only thing that's come from that is it has made me think about how inefficiently we do use resources. Right? Not. I don't mean in a sort of environmental sense. I mean that it costs a lot of money to do things, and sometimes the outcomes or the outputs just don't seem to justify the expense. But we accept it because that's the way it is, and
Exactly.
everybody is as inefficient.
Yeah.
But years ago, I worked on an exhibition about the crown jewels. We only wanted three outcomes. We're still just not very efficient.
Well, that's an interesting point. I agree with you. When I'm triggered to the question, is perfect is perfection even possible? Perfect in a situation where we are completely efficient,
Yeah, that's true.
or even 90% or 80%.
Yeah, that is also true.
Like maybe it's part of our world, so part of our lives in this complex world. Like I remember a saying, I think it was from a design president of Apple. What was his name? I remember.
Was that Johnny Ive? Was it?
No, it's another one. He has a user experience school, even now a training company and so
All
on.
right.
So, but he said in his book about design that it's people tend to forget that humans are complex in nature,
Right.
and people tend to forget in organizations also that those complex creatures make the organization. Therefore, the whole complexity increases by I don't know how much.
Right.
And in solving problems, people try to provide one solution for for a complex problem, a complex situation. They assume there is one tool, one solution, one simple linear solution needed for within a complex environment where there are complex systems, processes, all interconnected with each other. Like I think it's human nature. The complexity is human nature, and with complexity, I think it definitely within the complexity there is an inefficiency. I think inefficiency, not being effective, not doing completely the right thing. I think it's a human thing.
Well, that's a good point, but is that because we're not following Rifkin's plan? Would we be more efficient if we followed his plan?
then I'm triggered to the question, like, is it really necessary to be efficient for an individual? In a broader sense, general sense, I agree efficiency would benefit a lot of people. But the individual level, like for you, for me, for your neighbor, my neighbor, do they really care? Is it really for them important to be more efficient?
Well, I suppose we're networked, aren't we? You know, when you think about your chain at work, you can't do something until somebody else does something, who can't do some until somebody else, and so on and so on.
Right.
So increased efficiency means that everybody gets more things done more quickly, right? Which is generally a good thing.
Yeah, with the assumption that people are conscious about this concept, like we are interconnected, and the benefits we can benefit from others. Because I imagine, like if you have a company, having the idea to have a company which brings you more revenue, more income, you enjoy more working because you create more value for people. But are is every entrepreneur or every human being conscious about the opportunities a business or an enterprise can bring on a larger scale, or the even the personal happiness?
Well, certainly not. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe because people are not conscious about it, they're like, I'm if they are not conscious, I would understand why they not choose to be efficient.
Yeah. But I think then there's also people who just aren't efficient.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah, they aren't.
like I, for example, relatively new in a job, and I started the job after lockdown, right?
Right.
So all that, I can't just walk around the corner and ask somebody for some help for something that seems blindingly obvious to them, that is completely abnormal to me.
Yeah.
So in some cases for me it's been like, I don't know how to contact these particular people because they work externally to me, but they're important to my work.
Right.
But people can't be bothered to answer an email or pick up a phone when I ring them to ask them.
Wow.
So for me, it's actually now easier, quicker to conduct massive Google searches to try and find some people's contact information than it is to go to my own colleagues.
Around the corner.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, it would be if we were in the same building, right?
Yeah. That's some food for thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Innovation Book Club. If you've enjoyed this episode, then you can do 3 things to help us grow our audience. First of all, please leave us a 5-star review on your podcatcher of choice. This helps to feed the algorithm. Second, share this episode with your friends and colleagues if you think they would benefit. And finally, if you'd like to listen to all future episodes of the Innovation Book Club as soon as they're available, then please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. In the meantime, take care and we'll be back soon.